A while ago, I reviewed one of my favourite games, Ironsworn's Starforged. In that video, I said that what I'd learned from Starforged helped me to play far more of my RPG collection, but since that video was focused entirely on Starforged itself, I didn't do a very good job of explaining what those lessons were. This video is my attempt to make up for that. I think there are so many benefits to learning to play without a GM, but the main three for me are: 1. Solo play lets you play any game you like, whenever you like, in the tone and playstyle you prefer, letting you play more games and experience more of the hobby. 2. GMless play lets you run more games with a group without the stress of preparing sessions and campaigns that leads so many GMs to burn out. And 3. When you do decide to GM in a more traditional way, your experience with GMless games actually gives you more tools in your creative workshop, helping you improve your craft. But it's a bit daunting at first, and people often ask, how do I get started? Well, as with anything, some ways might suit you better than others, and there's no wrong way of doing it. I'm going to go over some of the options one by one, from the more traditional to the fuzzy edges of the hobby, and I'll cover the common concepts behind solo role-playing and explain them as we go. So the options are: 1. You can play a game you're familiar with using tools and techniques to emulate a GM. 2. You can play through pre-generated adventure modules. 3. You can play a game that's built from the ground up with GMless play in mind. 4. You can play a journaling game that emphasizes creative writing over decision making. 5. You can play a generative game that emphasizes other kinds of creativity. Or 6. You can play a gamebook that emphasizes decision making rather than creativity. If you're here for a strictly mechanical how-to, the meat of that is in the first section, so don't skip that. If you want to learn from the best, I recommend GMless games, which I'll cover in part 3. Otherwise, feel free to jump around with the timestamps below. So first off, most RPGs are designed with the assumption that a GM will be doing a lot of the creative work. So how can you replace a GM? Usually people use some combination of 3 tools: random tables to generate content, oracles to ask questions of a virtual GM, and GM emulators that can do things like track plot threads, set difficulty, or even do complex things like adjusting the narrative tension of your story. First off, you're probably already familiar with random tables, even if you've only seen them for generating loot. And you probably get the idea that you can use them to generate all kinds of things: locations, characters, creatures, plots. You can get collections of random tables on Drive-Thru and Itch. My favourite is Starsmith Expanded Oracles, which is designed for Starforged but can be used in any game. You might already have games with lots of random tables too, like Stars or Worlds Without Number, which have free versions on Drive-Thru. So let's say I'm starting a new game and want an intro mission. All you really need is a location and a thing to do there, so I might roll on a table I have to hand, like the action and focus tables in my Starsmith book, and get Investigate Camp. Great. Perhaps I've been tasked with tracking some bandits that have been terrorizing the local community, and I need to find out what I can about their camp. Next, you want that content to be dynamic and responsive to your decisions in the same way a GM is. The simplest way of doing that is called an oracle. Oracles are just more random tables that give you an answer when you ask the kind of question you might ask a GM. I tend to think of there being two types of oracle, a closed yes-no oracle and an open question oracle. Let's use a really simple example, a basic percentile yes-no oracle. Whenever you come to a sticking point in your story, you can ask a yes-no question and decide what the odds are of a yes answer. So, I'm scouting out that bandit camp and ask, is the camp guarded? And I decide that it's fairly likely, perhaps a 70% chance. I roll my D100, and if the result is 70 or under, the answer is yes. If it's over 70, the bandits are lax with their security. And you can keep going with that. Is there more than one guard? Are they patrolling? Do they have a vantage point? And you can start to build a picture of the situation you're facing. But what if you want something more substantial than a yes or no answer? Like, what does the camp look like? Well, this is where open question oracles come into play. They usually involve rolling on a couple of tables to generate a short phrase that you then interpret. It's simpler than it sounds, and no different really than what I did before to generate the scenario. So this time I'll use the description tables in the Mythic GM emulator. There's two tables, so I roll twice to generate a phrase. Let's say I get 48 and 45, healthily historical. That might sound like nonsense at first, but if you let it inspire you, you'll come up with something. For me, I might decide the bandits have made camp in a ruin rich with history, maybe an ancient fort, but they've kept it well. No sign of rubble, no dangerous crumbling walls or overgrowth, just a good place to mount a defense. This clearly isn't a fleeting stop. They're making this a home. Or maybe I rolled 9 and 66, busily mysterious. So the bandits are doing something strange but well organised. Maybe the camp is clustered around a central structure like some kind of obsidian obelisk, runes glowing on its surface. People are working around it. What are they doing down there? So anything I roll tells me loads about the character of both the location and the bandits. I didn't know what I would find, but my own creativity built the situation I face. I didn't know the answers, but my questions shaped the story. There is one more element that's useful to know: how to track your progress through a story. Again, there's various ways of doing this, simple and complex. For a super simple method, you could use tracks, where every time you reach a milestone, you fill a section of the track. Let's make it a little bit more complex with my mission. I need to learn as much as I can about these bandits and not be seen, so I might use a 4-section track called Learn About the Bandits that fills up whenever I make progress or succeed on a relevant check. And a counterpart, Spotted track, which fills up when I make mistakes. If the mission track fills first, then I can take all that info back to the village with the bandits being none the wiser. But if the counter track fills up first, then I'll have to fight or make my escape. So you can see now how the story could go in loads of different ways, and I still don't know how it'll end up. Some virtual GMs, like the Mythic GM emulator, take it even further by having the imaginary GM do things like interrupt you and raise the stakes when the tension is high, or tie plot threads together in unexpected ways. You can get tools that do a lot of the above. I mentioned the Mythic GM emulator, which you can get in book or card form, but also the plot unfolding machine is popular, and the Game Master's Apprentice is another card-based option. And check if your game has its own solo expansion, official or third-party. Many do. If that previous section sounded overwhelming, you can let someone else do a lot of the work by running pre-made adventures. This is a relatively simple option that doesn't require as much creative energy, but the downside is that you might get spoilers. Most adventure modules are designed for a GM to read and will straight up tell you if this humble NPC is secretly the big bad. Lots of people are okay with that though. You might not be doing this for the twists and reveals. If so, a pre-gen adventure will have all the things necessary. It'll give you descriptions of locations, it'll give you NPCs and monster stat blocks when they're needed, and hopefully a well-written, balanced and planned story. So it's a bit of a trade-off. That said, there are also adventure modules designed for solo play. For example, here's a little adventure for D&D 5e, Once We Were Gods, designed by Tim Roberts of Critical Kit. And a lot of designers are starting to bundle solo tools in with their games now. The Dragonbane starter set also comes with a solo adventure called Alone in Deepfall Breach, and the Cosmere RPG's intro adventure, The First Step, has a separate solo version as well. There are lots of games designed from the ground up with GMless play in mind that contain all of the tools I mentioned in the first section and more. For a great example of this, Across 1,000 Dead Worlds by Black Oath lays it all out really clearly in the Game Master emulation section on page 224. It introduces a gameplay loop where you establish a scene and roll the twist die to see if there's a surprise event, and then gives you all the tools I mentioned in the Tools and Techniques section. I think it's fair to describe Across 1,000 Dead Worlds as an OSR game, and despite some very similar surface level themes, the more narratively focused Ironsworn Starforged has a totally different yet familiar way of going about things. The Ironsworn system uses a combination of 3 mechanics to emulate a GM. First, each roll comes with its own difficulty generator in the form of 2d10s that you roll alongside every skill check, and it uses Powered by the Apocalypse style moves to tell you when to roll and how to proceed for each outcome, often leading you from one move to another whenever you're not sure. And tied to that is a system of tracks where you make progress along quests, expeditions, relationships and combat, each with their own set of moves to make progress or tie up that part of the story. The way these mechanics tie together to emulate a GM is nothing short of genius. But also, there are other ways of doing it. Sticking with the space theme, for small creatures such as we uses a system of prompts, where you set your own goal, and anytime there's an event, you draw a card and see what it tells you. And it's up to you how you resolve that situation. That mechanic is much more common in creative writing focused games that I'll get onto in the next section. But of course, how much writing you want to do in any of these games is totally up to you. And if you're not doing a lot of creative writing, card drawing might demand less creative energy from you, because it gives you the situation without you having to interpret too much. To get started, Colossal and Bramble Trek are classic and simple overland adventures that use that card drawing system. Black Oath games like Kernethlas and Across 1,000 Dead Worlds are much more old school and familiar if you're used to that 6 attributes and a d20 style, and I can't recommend Ironsworn Starforged enough. So one last aspect of how to play solo games is journaling your experience. It's usually a good idea to at least write some notes as you go to record what happened, but really how much and in what style is completely up to you. Occasionally I've seen people dismiss solo role-playing as writing a novel with extra steps, which isn't accurate, but also is that a bad thing? Since the 70s, role-playing games have been largely about telling stories, and the games themselves have provided the tools to do that. And plenty of published novels started life at the game table. So why not take that a step further and use RPGs as creative writing tools? The same games that might ease you into GMless gaming can also ease you into journaling. Colossal, Bramble Trek, and For Small Creatures Such as We all have gamey aspects that you'll be used to: resources, combat, and exploration. But the gameplay loop is broken into days where you draw cards to get a prompt for what happened on that day. You resolve the encounter and then write a little journal entry. But you can also find plenty of thematic and unique games that might ask a little bit more writing from you. And if you're here for some cozy vibes and just want to write in your own time and space with just a little bit of prompting, this kind of game is probably what you're looking for, with options like the dark academia, magic school themes of Tangle Blessings, or the coming-of-age witchy stories of Koroko, which, yes, I will get to reviewing at some point. In my video about RPG playstyles, a couple of commenters suggested a new category where you might focus on crafting a discrete thing, like a world or a map or a drawing. Kyle Wist called this style keepsake, and the ampersand called it generative. I think that's absolutely right. I tended to think of that style as falling under the creative writing category, because I was thinking solely of world-building games like Microscope, Journey, and The World We Left Behind. But what about games like Delve and D666, where you design a dungeon? There are games about drawing pictures or crafting origami. Is that creative writing? Does the songwriting in Punk is Dead count? When I was researching this, I found a really great collection of these generative games curated by Brian Colm on itch. I'll link to it below in case that style of solo play, where you get an actual object or crafted piece of art at the end, appeals. Lastly, moving to the very fringes of what you might call an RPG, we have choose-your-own-adventure style gamebooks. I think it's important to mention because the history and culture of solo RPGs and gamebooks are intertwined, and show how solo role-playing was always a part of our hobby. One of the earliest solo RPG adventures was Buffalo Castle. It was published only a year after the original Dungeons & Dragons in 1975, using the Tunnels and Trolls system, and inspired the later Fighting Fantasy series. Despite them being more related than you might think, to me, gamebooks are almost like the opposite style to journaling games, in that the creative writing has been done for you. You're here to make decisions and experience the story. A popular modern example that uses traditional RPG rules and tropes is the Destiny Quest series. But of course, you're not limited to that traditional style, and if you want a more story-focused experience, people often recommend Heart of Ice. And just because there's a gap between gamebooks and journaling games, doesn't mean you can't find things in between, like Paul Saker's The Balsam Lake on Murders, which is an atmospheric and mindful creative writing game that uses some gamebook techniques to guide you through the experience. So while I hope all this was useful, I'm far from the only person to have tackled this subject. But the video's already quite long, so please check the description for some other resources, like videos, blogs, and actual plays that I've enjoyed and found helpful. And for now, I'll say thank you ever so much for watching. And as always, a massive thanks to this month's Ko-fi supporters, who are helping me to invest in the channel and get my hands on some of the viewer-suggested games. This is another little extra video, and we'll be back to the usual schedule of reviewing small indie and solo games next week, with a truly special and unique game that I fell in love with as soon as I opened it. Here's a clue, by the way. And then in September, I'm hoping to cover the first of the suggested games in the big poll I did. So thank you for voting in that. And until then, happy adventures.